moments.
Okay, but we do begin with Mueller's testimony tomorrow. So joining us now is the man who is leading the charge. It is Congressman Jerry Nadler. He's the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, where Robert Mueller begins his testimony tomorrow morning. Congressman, thanks so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
Let's talk about this new directive from the Department of Justice that Robert Mueller got last night in the form of a letter warning him basically to stay within the confines of his report. How big of an impediment is that for you and your committee?
Well, I don't think it's much of an impediment, simply because Bob Mueller had indicated repeatedly that he was going to do exactly that. I think it's incredibly arrogant of the department to try to instruct him as to what to say. It's part of the ongoing cover-up by the administration to keep information away from the American people. But I think that it's not going to have a real impact. You
don't think they have any authority to instruct him in that way? Must he comply with that letter?
No, he must. No, he does not have to comply with that letter. He doesn't work for them, and that letter asks things that are beyond the power of the agency to ask, even if he still worked for them.
Have you all been operating under the assumption that Robert Mueller will go beyond his report, that he will be able to say things that are not in there?
No, we've been operating under the assumption that he'll do essentially what he said. He'll stay more or less within the bounds of the report. But, you know, it's important that the American people hear directly from Mueller what the report found. They found that the Russians interfered in the election very systematically to help Trump, that the Trump campaign welcomed that assistance, that the president repeatedly obstructed justice and repeatedly tried to hamper the investigation, and repeatedly instructed people to lie to investigators and to the American people. Anyone else who had done what the report finds that he has done would face criminal prosecution.
Are you going to ask that very question of Robert Mueller? Would anyone else have faced criminal prosecution?
I don't think we'll ask it in that form, because I don't think he'd answer it in that form, but the report makes it fairly clear. But again, remember, the report found 37, the report indicted 30, Mueller's investigation resulted in the indictment of 37 people, including the president's campaign manager, deputy campaign manager, national security advisor. It details 10 instances where the president obstructed justice, and repeatedly where the president tells people to lie to investigators. And anyone other than the president who did that would face serious consequences.
It's been reported that you all have been having mock hearings preparing for tomorrow. Can you just tell us a little bit what those look like? Who's playing Robert Mueller?
Well, we haven't had mock hearings yet. We're having one today.
Oh, you're having one today?
We're having one today.
Okay, so what's the plan for those?
Well, the plan is very simple. We want to tell the story to the American people. You know, the Attorney General and the President have repeatedly lied about the investigation, its findings. They've repeatedly said the investigation found no collusion and no obstruction, and that it totally exonerated the president. Each of those three statements is simply not true. The investigation certainly found, as I said, 10 instances of obstruction by the president, that the president repeatedly lied to the American people, that they welcomed the assistance of the Russians, that they knew about it. And we want to get these facts out so the American people know what we're dealing with and hear it from Mueller himself, rather than the lies that are coming from the president and the Attorney General, who has been functioning as the president's personal lawyer and not as the Attorney General of the United States.
Who's going to play Robert Mueller in the mock hearings that you're having?
I'm not going to get into that, or if anybody is playing him.
Here's what Neil Katyal, the former acting U.S. Solicitor General, has suggested that the three questions that must be asked and that basically would answer everything. Here they are. Did your report find no collusion? That seems like a really important question to ask. What if Robert Mueller says, I refer you to my report?
He may very well. And then we'll have to, we will be referring to specific pages and specific sections in the report and asking him to comment on them. And that'll make the point.
Okay, so let me think about that. You're going to refer to specific pages and ask him to comment on them. How's that going to sound? What's the question that you're going to ask him?
Well, paragraph 2 on page whatever says the following. Is that correct? Did you find that? Does this describe obstruction of justice?
That's a good one. I mean, because then if he says yes, it does, then where does that lead you?
Well, as I said, our goal is to break the lies of the president and the attorney general in saying that the report found no collusion, found that there was no collusion, that there was no obstruction, and exonerated the president. It did not exonerate the president. The report is chock full of very damning information against the president. Again, as I said, it found 10 instances of the president obstructing justice. It found instances of the president instructing people to lie to investigators and to lie to the American people. And the American people need to hear this from Mueller. And then, after that, we need to get some of the witnesses cited by Mueller before the committee. Now, the administration has done what no administration has ever done before. They've stonewalled all subpoenas. They've said no one will testify. We will break that, and we will hear from people like Don McGahn, et cetera, and they will testify. And the American people will know will know what the report found, will know the facts, and then can make judgments instead of. Remember, people have not read the 448-page report. What they have heard for 5 months are the lies of the president and the attorney general of no collusion, no obstruction, and total exoneration. The report did not exonerate the president. There's plenty of obstruction detailed in the report.
Are you frustrated by Robert Mueller's take on all of this?
No, I think Robert Mueller has been an excellent public servant and has done a very honest report. I think there is a catch-22 in the interpretation of the law, and that is that normally you say that a prosecutor shouldn't comment on someone who is not being indicted, and on the conduct of someone who is not being indicted. And that makes sense. If someone's not being indicted, you don't say, but he was terrible anyway. But where someone is not being indicted because the interpretation by the Department of Justice is that the president cannot be indicted no matter what the evidence, which is their interpretation, then I think it's just wrong to say you're not going to present to the American people the facts about what he did so the American people can make a judgment and so that Congress can use its or choose whether to use its remedies.
You're talking about the President of the United States. Do you think there's a possible scenario by which Robert Mueller says, I cannot speak about about President Trump because he was not indicted? Is that possible? He will not be able to speak at all about President Trump?
No. He can say about President Trump what the report says, what the report finds, which, as I said, is very damning.
There were at least 10 instances of what legal experts believe are obstruction of justice that the report laid out. And yet Robert Mueller didn't go any further than just saying, here, Congress, here you go.
That's
what
right.
do you think he wanted you to do with that?
Well, I think that he took the position that, and he's part of the Justice Department, so he had to take the position because the Justice Department says, as a matter of law, that a president cannot be indicted, and therefore he says in the report, indicting the president was never an option, no matter how much evidence there is. He presents evidence. He then gives it, he also says, and I'm not sure I agree with him, that since you can't indict the president, you can't say that he would have been indicted but for this, because that would be unfair to the president because he can't defend himself in a trial which won't occur. I think that that's unrealistic, that if Congress, in effect, he's saying to Congress, we can't indict the president. You have to make your judgments. You have to use your remedies, censure, impeachment, whatever. You have to make your judgments. And to do that, we need all the facts, including all the evidence and the conclusions about the alleged crimes.
I mean, by the way, there's a person who agrees with you, and that's Attorney General Bill Barr. On May 30th, he agreed that Robert Mueller should have gone further. Here's a moment from this interview that he gave, just to remind people of what Bill Barr said back then. Listen to this.
I personally felt he could have reached a decision.
In your view, he could have reached a conclusion.
Right, he could have reached a conclusion. The opinion says you cannot indict a president while he's in office, but he could have reached a decision as to whether it was criminal activity. But he had his reasons for not doing it.
Well, he states what his reasons for not doing it are, because it would be unfair to the president who couldn't defend himself in a trial that wouldn't occur. Now, Barr reaches the conclusion that he left it to Barr. No, I think it's very clear he left it to Congress, and we have to exercise our powers. And again, remember, the key point of these hearings now is to break the lies that we've heard from the Attorney General and the President, and to show to the American people what the report found about the President's obstructions of justice, about the campaign, about the Russians interfering with the election, about the President's obstruction of justice, about the 37 indictments, and about the President repeatedly telling people to lie to investigators and to the American people. People have to know that.
Nancy Pelosi just sent this memo out to Democratic House members this morning. It was literally hot off the press when it got to me because we got a copy of it. And it's basically how she thinks Democrats should talk about this after the fact. Just what you're saying. Remind people of the sort of top line findings of this. Did you help craft this memo?
No, I haven't seen it.
Well, here it is if you want to take a look at it. But the point is, I think, that it's not going to be over tomorrow for all of you. So what's the upshot?
No.
Okay, so
it is certainly not going to be over.
Then what?
Well, we're going to court in the next few days, as I've said before, to try to force people like Don McGahn and Hope Hicks and other people and various other people who are fact witnesses who testified to the Mueller committee to come before the committee and testify in open hearings as to what they saw, so that the conclusions of the Mueller investigation can be laid open, not only the conclusions, but that people can see the testimony of these people and form judgments. That the American people can see this. And
what do you think would ever get Nancy Pelosi into the category of impeachment? 88 Democrats, House Democrats, have come forward and saying that they would like to pursue an impeachment beyond an inquiry, to begin the process of impeachment. And so what could happen tomorrow?
Well, 88 Democrats have said that we should have an impeachment inquiry.
Okay, impeachment inquiry. But Nancy Pelosi hasn't gone that far.
No.
And so what would ever get her into that category?
I can't speak for Nancy as to whether, or to Nancy Pelosi as to what would get her into that. I can only speak to what I've said about impeachments. And in order to impeach a president, I think there are really three tests. One, do you conclude that there's real proof that the president has committed impeachable offenses? Number two...
But you've already answered that yourself. You say yes.
I've said there's substantial evidence, but yes. Number two, are these impeachable offenses serious offenses? And number three, is there enough evidence, public, so that impeaching the president would not tear the country apart? And I think it's very important that the people understand the evidence that there is, so that they, and therefore the committee and the Congress, can make that judgment.
So that's what you think is going to change tomorrow, the public evidence component of this?
Well, it's going to be influenced tomorrow. I hope it changes, because what people are reacting to now is, as I said, are the lies for 5 months. What they've heard is that from the president, from the attorney general, from Fox News, from other places, repeatedly, over and over again, that the report found, that Mueller investigation found that there was no collusion, that there was no obstruction of justice, and that it totally exonerated the president. Those are three false statements. It did not exonerate the president. It found plenty of obstruction, and there's a lot of evidence of not criminal conspiracy, but of cooperation, but of welcoming the assistance of the Russians.
We have to go, but very quickly, why did it take 5 months? It's been 3 months since the redacted version of the Mueller report came out. Why did it take so long to have this hearing?
It took so long because frankly, we're having difficulty. The administration is doing something that is unprecedented in American history, and that is refusing and instructing all people to refuse subpoenas from Congress. And it has taken us, and it took us, and even Mueller was not going to, we had to negotiate the terms of his talking to us, and that's why it's limited to 3 hours. Even prior to this, if a committee issued a subpoena, people came. They might claim a privilege, not answer a specific question, a Fifth Amendment, executive privilege, but they came and they testified. The president has said out loud, we're going to refuse all subpoenas, and they have refused all subpoenas, not only about this, but about the separation of families at the border, about the decision on the census, about everything. They have systematically tried to stymie Congress' duty to oversee the administration, hold it accountable, and this is what has taken time.
Congressman Jerry Nadler, thank you. New Day will be in D.C. tomorrow for all of the coverage of these hearings. We'll be watching with rapt attention, obviously. Thanks so much for all the information here.
You're quite welcome.
Great to have you. David.